Are you ready for the word? Turn to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh, your mighty one. In it you shall not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Just to remind you where we started last week, in July and again in August, I entered into 2 bodybuilding competitions. Both of those competitions were held on a Saturday, 7th day of the week. I was called 2 weeks before Sukkot and confronted for doing that. None of you, someone else. The man who called was upset, and he made his disapproval of what I had done clearly known to me. Once he had stated his disapproval, he asked me this question: don't you think it was wrong to have done that? Didn't mind him calling, didn't mind his disapproval, but the question seemed ridiculous to me. Why did it seem ridiculous? Because if I thought I was wrong for doing it, I wouldn't have done it. Or if I thought it was wrong, but I did it anyway, I would have hidden all the evidence that I did it. Isn't that what we do? Right? So the question that he asked kind of baffled me. I could have understood had the question been this: do you mind sharing with me why you don't believe you violated the Sabbath by doing what you did? That question makes more sense, and it allows us to have a more productive discussion. By the way it was asked, it comes across this way: I'm certain that you violated the Sabbath. I'm certain that I'm right about my judgment, and that what you did was a violation and a profaning of the Sabbath, and I am shocked that you don't see how wrong it was to do what you did. That's the way it comes across. That is what is meant when you say, don't you think it was wrong to have done it? There's no way to have a discourse with someone who approaches that subject or any subject in that way. But I'm not going to allow the way the question was framed and delivered to keep me from having a discussion about what I did and on a discussion about the Sabbath and how I view that it should be kept. So what I have chosen to do is approach this subject with you, and to approach it with you in this way. I'm going to approach it as if all of you had come to me and said, Steve, do you mind sharing with us why you don't believe you violated the Sabbath when you entered those 2 bodybuilding competitions? That's an awesome question, and it's a very kind way of asking it, so thank you. And I'm going to share with you, I don't mind telling you why I believe that I didn't violate the Sabbath. Now, if you didn't listen to last Sabbath's message yet, I would encourage you to go do that. The title of it was, Should We Keep the Sabbath Has Become, How Do We Keep the Sabbath? And that was delivered October the 25th. So if you haven't listened to that, please do. Because in that message, I did 3 things. Number 1, I laid the foundation by which all of us must approach this subject or any biblical doctrine. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2 says, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if any man thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. So I began this series by admitting and confessing I know nothing yet as I ought to know. Not even about the Sabbath. Everything I'll say to you is based on the understanding I have today in my search to learn, keep, and do what Torah commands me to do concerning Torah or any other subject. With that being said, last Sabbath I also asked you and anybody else if they'd be willing to at least consider that perhaps that neither do you know everything yet as you ought to know. Be willing to at least consider that as a possibility. And we can bring 1 Corinthians 13 into play here as well, which would say that if by chance you happen to be somebody who does possess all knowledge and who does understand all mysteries and who can speak with the tongues of men and of angels, please at least add some agape love in there so that you can have compassion and long suffering with those of us who have not yet reached that level. Right? I received a message this week from a man who I consider to have vast amounts of knowledge, vast amounts of wisdom and understanding. And before I tell you what his message said, let me preface it by saying this. I mentioned to you last week as we began this study that I had a lot of apprehension about beginning the study. I wasn't excited about doing it because I know that it can be a volatile subject for some, and I know that there are a lot of different approaches and beliefs as to how we keep the Sabbath. And so I really wasn't excited about doing a series. And I was mostly concerned about doing the series. I confess to you, I was mostly concerned about doing the series because my dear friend, Rabbi Natan in Pennsylvania, I knew he'd be listening to everything I had to say. He is so faithful to connect with us every Sabbath via Facebook. And he's a dear friend whom I have the utmost respect for. And I know that he is very strict in his observance of the Sabbath. I have even mentioned to you before how beautiful I think it is that in the way that he keeps the Sabbath. It wasn't that long ago I told you that he had shared with me that beginning at sunset on Friday, the way he envisions it and pictures it is that he puts a bubble around that day. And at sunset on Friday, he steps into that bubble and he refuses to let anything come into that bubble that would disrupt his keeping of the Sabbath. I think that is absolutely beautiful. However, my observance of the Sabbath isn't quite that structured. And so when I knew we were going to be doing this study, I was concerned that once I shared my understanding of how I'm to keep the Sabbath, I was concerned that I would disappoint him, and I didn't want to disappoint him. I so love and respect Rabbi Natan, it was a heavy concern on my heart. I didn't want my teachings to disappoint him in any way. Well, as is his custom, he did hear my teaching last Sabbath. And Tuesday at 2:44 p.m., he sent me a message. And his message started this way: your Shabbat sermon. I read those words and I felt myself sigh and brace myself for what would come next. Here was his message. Your Shabbat sermon was amazing. It burns my oil that we have to deal with these self-appointed Torah police. What blows my mind is that you never see this kind of behavior in Jewish circles. They, Jews, will not criticize another Jew's observance of the Sabbath or how they go about observing the Sabbath. They feel that that is between that person and God. This criticizing someone else's way of keeping the Sabbath, this is mainly among Christians, especially those who consider themselves to be Torah observant. My theory is they drag these attitudes over from when they left churchianity. His words not only enlightened me, gave me information I didn't have, but his words strengthened me. And I asked his permission to share his words of wisdom with you, and he was prompt to grant me that permission. What a beautiful way to begin a conversation about how to keep the Sabbath. His message was full of love, full of wisdom, and in reading it, I came to this realization. When I began to study, the one man I feared that I might disappoint is too full of the Spirit of Yahweh to be disappointed. And I find joy in that. So, I'm back to last week. The first thing I did was I laid the foundation by which all of us must approach this subject. And that foundation is no man knows anything yet as he ought to know. Number two, I told you that we're going to examine subjects such as, shall we kindle a fire? Can we kindle a fire? Can we buy? Can we sell? Can we do our own pleasure? And those kinds of things. And we're going to begin that process this morning. And the third thing I did was I gave you 7 of my core beliefs about the Sabbath. So if you want to know what those 7 core beliefs are and didn't listen to last Sabbath, I encourage you to go do that. This morning, the question we're going to deal with is whether we can kindle a fire on the Sabbath. How many of you have heard that we should not kindle a fire on the Sabbath? None of you? All of you? Some of you? Okay. So, can we, is the question. Or let me ask it this way, since most of us are not in need of keeping ourselves warm anymore by having to kindle a fire in a fireplace or a wood-burning stove. Some do, but most of us do not. So really the question becomes, does the Bible forbid me from turning my stove on the Sabbath? I mean, literally, that's what it boils down to. Can I or can I not turn my stove on? And if it does forbid me from turning my stove on, then the next question becomes, how many crock pots do I need to own in order to stay in compliance with that command? So we could entitle today's message, The Crock Pot Sabbath Doctrine. Not crackpot, crock pot. The crock pot Sabbath doctrine, and I'm not knocking crock pots. I like crock pots. Kimberly brought me something this morning. I looked in the bag and it said, crock pot grits. Never heard of them, but I'm looking forward to trying those out. Thank you. But the crock pot Sabbath doctrine is simply this. If you cannot kindle a fire on the Sabbath, then you cannot cook on the Sabbath. Therefore, we need to cook everything on Friday and put it in a crock pot or an Instapot so it stays warm through the Sabbath day, or else you eat sandwiches. So what we're going to do this morning is look at what Torah says about that. Now, before we move to the passage that says don't kindle a fire, I want to point out a few things to you there in Exodus 20. If you still have your Bibles open, I want you to look at that with me. You've known me long enough to know that when I look at the Sabbath or any of the Moedim of Yahweh, what I look for is the simple instruction that Yahweh's given to us. Yahweh said that his instruction, that his laws, that his commands are not hard, they're not difficult. Right. So if I'm making the observance of any of them hard, if I'm making keeping Sabbath or keeping any of the other feast days difficult, I am convinced I'm approaching it the wrong way. Yep. Because he said they weren't hard. In keeping with that approach, I look at Exodus 20 and I seek to break it down to what simple thing is it that Yahweh's telling me to do. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to be difficult. There's something simple he wants me to do to keep the Sabbath. And here's what I see when I look at the commandment there in Exodus 20. I'm to remember the Sabbath day because it's set apart. Well, that's not hard to do. Remember it. The second thing I'm to do is remember that it is the seventh day. That was hard for a while till I realized that I needed to just believe what my Bible said, not what men were saying. So remember that it is the seventh day. The third thing I need to do is in it, you shall not do any work. So there's where that bubble comes into play. Step in it, and in it, do no work. Nor shall any of these do any work. Well, who does it list that is not also, who also is not to do any work? Son, daughter, manservant, maidservant, cattle, strangers, all strangers, or certain strangers? Strangers within your gates. All right, well, notice who's not mentioned. Wives, they have to work. You know that's not true. The thou shalt not, that's inclusive of a unit. Two become one. You, your husband and wife, your son, your daughter. Okay, anyway. That's simple enough, isn't it? Remember that it's a set apart day. Remember it's on the seventh day. Remember not to do any work, nor shall these others do any work, your son, your daughter, your servants, your cattle, your strangers, who are within your gate. That's an important distinction being made there. You cannot go outside your gate and demand strangers not to work. You can't go across your property line and demand that people stop working. But now if they're coming onto your property or into your home, you can say, nope, we don't do work here on the Sabbath day. Those within your gate, on your property. So that's an important distinction. Now go to Deuteronomy 5, and let's read this fourth commandment again from there, because a little footnote is added that is important for us to consider. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. Keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as Yahweh your mighty one has commanded you. Now Exodus 20 said remember it. Here we're told to keep it. And the Hebrew word here is shamar. Shamar means to guard it and protect it. So Exodus 20 said remember it. Well, what does that mean, remember it? Well, I think the answer is given here in Deuteronomy 5. To remember it means you guard it. You mark it, and you guard it, and you protect it. So that it becomes wholly set apart and sanctified for you. It is holy and sanctified. You protect it so it becomes sanctified for you. Verse 13. Same instruction as Exodus 20. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh your mighty one. In it you shall not do any work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your ox, nor your ass, nor any of your cattle, nor the stranger that is within your gates, that your manservant and your maidservant may rest as well as you. So again, we're told that we cannot work on that day, and we're told who else cannot work on that day, and then we're given why they can't work on that day. It says so that our servants also can rest. They don't have to work. You are to rest, and you're to make sure that everybody under your care can rest. It's not enough for you to rest if others have to facilitate your resting. You're to make sure that those under your care also have the opportunity to do what you're doing, which is rest. Now, the important footnote I mentioned is down in verse 15. And remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, that Yahweh your mighty one brought you out from there through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore Yahweh your mighty one commanded you to keep, and this is not the word shamar, This Hebrew word just simply means do. You shall do the Sabbath day. Do it. Now here's the important point in this footnote that we need to keep in mind. When you were a slave, Yahweh said to the children of Israel, when you were a slave, you had no choice. If your taskmaster said you're working, you had no choice, you had to work. But Yahweh says to them, you're not a slave anymore. I did a mighty thing. I brought you out of Egypt. I set you free. I delivered you. And now I command you, do not work. That's extremely important. Again, there was a time when they had no choice as to whether they would work or not. He's saying now you do have a choice. So pause your thinking here for just a moment and try your best to imagine that you were there at Mount Sinai when all of this is going on. Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5, you are there. And imagine that your Creator, who has just delivered you out of slavery, has come down to give you instruction of what He expects out of you on this holy set-apart day. He's told you the Sabbath is holy, and now your Creator has come down. You can see the mountain burning, and He's come down to instruct you on what He expects out of you on this most holy day. He expects you to obey Him concerning this sacred, sanctified day, so you've got to pay attention and be ready to do what He says. So Yahweh speaks. You're there, He speaks. And He says, here is the strict instruction I'm giving you for this day. Don't work. In my heart, I can see Yahweh smiling when He said that. This is my command. Don't you dare work on that day. These people had been slaves. And now Yahweh has given them a command. Don't work. Can you not picture the people saying, really? That's the command? You're commanding us to rest? Yes. Well, heck yeah, we can do that. I'm commanding you and your donkey to rest. Well, yes, sir, I can do that. I am of the opinion that we get so caught up in trying to make the Sabbath holy that we have failed to see how holy that it is. We get so caught up in trying to serve it that we forget that Yahweh gave it to us to serve us. So His command is simple. I command you to rest. And do you know what Israel said? Shoot, yeah. We can do that. So let's try it. I'm going to be Yahweh. You be you. And as Yahweh, I'm going to tell you what He commands that you do on the Sabbath. And if you think that it's something that you could do, then respond, yeah, I can do that. So, Yahweh, I command you to rest on the seventh day. Come on. Can you do that?
Yes, sir.
That's how simple the Sabbath is. Stop getting your panties in a wad. Stop getting all anxious. Stop hyperventilating. Stop walking around like you have some awful, dreadful duty to perform. Relax. Yahweh's trying to bless us with a day that's unlike every other day of the week. A day where we step away from the grind of life, we cease from our labors, and we rest. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, it says this. Yahweh said to Adam, in the sweat of your face shall you eat bread till you return unto the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and until dust shall you return. I'm 67 years old. I started working for a paycheck when I was 15 years old in a sawmill. Not one day of that was fun. I've been working full time for 50 years now. 50 years. I've eaten my bread by the sweat of my face. I work because a man that doesn't work shouldn't eat. But I have worked 50 years. And now I rejoice that several years ago, Yahweh showed me that I only have to do that 6 days. Yeah. I used to do it 7. Yeah. But he showed me 6 days shall you do all your work. And I'm commanding you, Stephen B. Martin, I command you rest on that 7th day. Yes, sir. I can do that. So that is what I do. I don't work. I don't think about work. I don't sit down and plan out some work. I just rest. That's how simple keeping the Sabbath is. There is, you read Exodus 20, read Deuteronomy 5, there is no command connected to the Sabbath that says you shall pray for 6 hours on the Sabbath day. You shall fast every Sabbath. You shall study thine scriptures for 10 hours. You shall sing for 2. Those are things that we have conjured up in our mind that we have to do to keep the Sabbath. But Yahweh said, you shall not work, you shall rest. We read it in both places. Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5, that's how simple he said it is. Do not work, rest. We're on our way to where it tells us not to kindle a fire. I've not forgotten that, so be patient with me as we work our way there. Yahweh gave Moses the commandment in Exodus 20, and then if you read on through the book of Exodus, you'll find out that he brings Moses back. Moses comes down, you know, the golden calf thing, and then he goes back up, and then he comes back down, and he goes back up. And all this while that Moses is on the mountain with Yahweh, the one thing that Yahweh keeps reiterating over and over and over and over again to Moses is the Sabbath, as if that's the one we're going to have the most difficulty with. And he just keeps going over the Sabbath with Moses. Moses makes sure that they understand that I'm telling them that on the 7th day they're not to work and they are to rest. And after Yahweh would tell Moses that, Moses would come down and tell the people that. One of the places that we see this dialogue taking place is Exodus 35. Look there. Moses has just had this encounter with Yahweh where Yahweh reiterated the Sabbath to him, and so Moses will do it with the people. Verse 1, Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel together, said unto them, these are the words which Yahweh has commanded that you should do them. 6 days shall work be done, but on the 7th day there shall be to you a holy day, a Sabbath day of rest to Yahweh. Whosoever does any work therein shall be put to death. Okay, well, wait a minute now. Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5 contains the same things here about work 6 days, 7th day, set it apart and rest. But now there's a little addendum that if you don't cease from your labors and rest, you're going to be put to death. Seems to be getting more serious. So is this verse saying the death penalty is in play if somebody breaks the Sabbath? If you break the Sabbath, you should be stoned to death. There are some who think so. And they're quite disappointed that they can't do it. And they use the example of the man who gathered sticks on the Sabbath and was stoned for doing so as proof that there is a death penalty attached to the Sabbath. But I do not believe that Torah commands us to stone to death anyone who breaks the Sabbath. Exodus 20 didn't mention it. Deuteronomy 5 didn't mention it. So how is it that I read it here in Exodus 35? How is it not commanding that Sabbath breakers be stoned to death? Let me share with you how I understand it. The language here is the exact same word usage in Torah that we find when the Torah deals with rebellious children. Leviticus 20 says that if a child curses his father or his mother, he shall be, same words, put to death. Same word, same wording. So let me ask you this. Do you think that there was ever a child throughout all of Bible history who might have committed this sin? That they cursed their father and their mother. Is there ever a biblical record of any child being stoned to death for doing so? No. So if there were children who were cursing their father and their mother, and the command is you stone them to death, and the people weren't doing that, then they are breaking Torah. So it seems to me that we have misinterpreted that command. Consider the command about putting rebellious children to death in Leviticus 29 this way. Think about this first. The command to honor your father and your mother is the first command with what? With a promise. Honor your father and mother. Why? Why? Because they deserve it? Well, yeah, but that's not why we're told to do it. Honor your father and mother because that your days may be long. So take that promise and interpret Leviticus 20 from that promise. The Torah instruction concerning a rebellious child seems to me to be saying, honor your parents and live long. Curse them and you'll die too soon. Honor your parents and live long. Curse them and you won't. The instruction is not to take them out and stone them. The warning is that such a mindset and such a temperament shortens a person's life. Well, the same, I think, is true of the Sabbath command. We got the same principle here. The Sabbath command is about a day that's loaded down with benefits. Resting has benefits. And to ignore the Sabbath instruction and to insist on working 7 days a week is to shorten a person's life. You wear yourself out. I see the command having that warning, not commanding that somebody ought to be stoned. Let me ask you to consider this. When the man gathered sticks and he was caught gathering sticks, did Moses immediately have him stoned to death? Do you remember? Remember the story? What did Moses do when they brought that man to him? He had him put in hold and said, I'm not sure what to do. We're going to have to ask Yahweh. Now, if Exodus 35 means just stone him, he wouldn't have had to ask Yahweh. Right. Come on. I'm trying to help us here. If Exodus 35:3 is clear instruction, put him to death, then Moses wouldn't have had to say, put him up. I need to go pray about this and have Yahweh tell me what to do because I don't know what to do. I think that's clear. I think it makes it clear that Exodus 35:2 is not a command to stone people. And further, there's something else going on with this man who gathered sticks. And either we aren't told what else is going on or we're not seeing it. It's not just that he labored on the Sabbath. There's something else going on. And again, further, let me say this. Are we to believe that this man is the only man in the history of all of Israel throughout all biblical days? He's the only man that ever broke the Sabbath. Yet he's the only one we know of that got stoned to death for breaking the Sabbath. So there's something else going on that we don't know or yet understand. Multitudes of others broke the Sabbath, and yet we never read of them being put to death. The prophets testify of how entire generations and even an entire nation forsook the Sabbath. And there's no record that any of them were stoned for doing so. You ever read the book of Nehemiah? As we work our way through this study of the Sabbath, that would be a good book for you to read. Go read the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is one of the most zealous men that you'll ever read about or read from in all of Scripture. That man had a zeal for Yahweh. On one occasion, Nehemiah caught people breaking the Sabbath. This man, zealous for the law of Yahweh, caught them breaking the Sabbath. And he had a conniption fit. I mean, full-blown, in a rage, conniption fit about it. But he didn't kill any of them. So that tells me that any interpretation that says that Exodus 35:2 is telling us that if a man breaks the Sabbath, he should be stoned, that's a misinterpretation of the Scripture, because those who were closest to that command in time, those closest to the command, never interpreted it that way. Instead, I believe the correct understanding of this instruction is anybody who works 7 days a week is killing themselves. They're putting themselves to death by doing it. All right, y'all so excited about that, I'm going to move on from verse 2 with this admission: I know nothing yet as I ought to know. Now that brings me to verse 3. You shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. So again, this verse has been interpreted by many to mean that you cannot light a fire or cook on the Sabbath day. You cannot light a fire to warm yourself unless you start the fire on Friday. You cannot light a candle unless you light it on Friday. You cannot kindle a fire on your stove at home, so you have to do your cooking on Friday. And I've been told, I don't know, but I have been told that in Jerusalem, that the elevators stop on every floor on the Sabbath day. Every floor on the Sabbath day, in order to ensure that Sabbath keepers don't have to mash the button, because they interpret mashing the button as activating some electrical process that could be interpreted as kindling a fire, and so they won't do it. So they mash all the buttons so you can just get on there and it's going to stop at every floor and you get off where you want to get off. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard. So my point being this: some have interpreted Exodus 35:3 very strictly. No fireplace fires, no cooking, no driving, no pushing buttons on elevators, no flipping light switches. If you want a light on in your home, you turn it on Friday and let it stay on throughout the Sabbath day. So many who desire to walk in obedience refuse to kindle a fire to cook on the Sabbath. Therefore, they cook on Friday and they let it set in crock pots so that they put it in crock pots because they're less entangled with the electrical issue than others are, right? They don't see the electricity being an issue, but they don't want to light their stove, so they use crock pots or pans to keep their food warm, to ensure that they're not breaking the command. Let me give you my understanding of this text. If you are using a crock pot because the food preparation is work and you don't want to work on the Sabbath, so you prepare your food on Friday, I get that and I see what you're doing and I understand why. Or if you cook it on Friday and you put it in a pan and just warm it up on the Sabbath so that you don't have to do all that prepping and cooking on the Sabbath because you consider that work and you don't want to have to do all that work on the Sabbath. I get that and I understand why. You don't want to do the actual work of prepping a meal on the Sabbath day. Again, I understand that. But if you're doing it so that you don't have to kindle a fire on the Sabbath, I am of the opinion that that approach stems from a misunderstanding of this verse. And here's why. It says there plainly, you shall not kindle a fire on the Sabbath day in all your habitations. How many different kinds of labor are there? You know, in that day, labor would have involved plowing, hooking up oxen, unhooking oxen, sowing, reaping, binding sheaves, threshing, winnowing, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking. In order to have clothes, you'd have had to shear wool, beat wool, dye wool, spin, weave, sew, tie, right? Perhaps you got your clothing from hides. So in that case, you'd have to trap or hunt. You'd have to slaughter, skin, tan, cut, scrape, sew. To have shelter, you'd have to cut down trees. You'd have to build. You'd have to attach. You'd have to cover with skins, etc., etc., etc. If you had livestock, you had to feed them. You had to water them. You had to slaughter them. You had to protect them. So there's multitudes upon multitudes of different kinds of labor that a person can do. So do you see the point? The kinds of labor that one can do is a long list. Different people do all kinds of different labor. So if Exodus 35 is forbidding us to work on the Sabbath, why would it single out just this one particular kind of labor? You see, that makes no sense. In other words, what if it had said, 6 days shall you labor, but on the Sabbath, that's the Sabbath unto Yahweh, you shall not labor. Do not dye your wool on the Sabbath day in all of your habitations. See, it wouldn't single out that one labor because it's leaving out thousands of others. And so it's safe to come to the assumption that verse 3 is not singling out one kind of labor, because if it was, there are thousands it's leaving out that we've got to now decide, well, is it okay if I do those, as long as I don't have to start a fire to do them? Why single out one strange, singular kind of labor? And the clear answer to me seems to be that perhaps it's actually not singling out any labor at all. Perhaps it's a warning about something else. This word kindle is also used many times in the book of Jeremiah, but throughout the Tanakh. But it's used twice in Jeremiah 10. The exact same Hebrew word translated kindle here is used in Jeremiah 10 twice, and twice it gets translated as brutish. Brutish. Brutish means to be driven or to be controlled by your base desires rather than reason. Brutish means to act stupid instead of act smart. What if we use that word in Exodus 35:3? Verse 2 says, you shall not work. Verse 3 says, rest. What if we use the Jeremiah translation of this Hebrew word here? What if it actually is saying, you shall not work, you shall rest, don't be stupid. Don't be brutish. Don't let your base desire to get things done control you. Rest. In Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 9, Jeremiah said that he decided that he was no longer going to mention Yahweh's name. He was no longer going to preach to the people. He was done. He said, but Yahweh's word began to burn in my bones. Burn like a fire in my bones. And the word used there, same word translated kindled. So we know here he's using it as a figure of speech. There wasn't a literal fire in his bones, right? I think it would be an error to see Exodus 35:3 being literal instead of figurative. In Jeremiah chapter 44, Yahweh talks about how the people have kindled his fury and kindled his wrath, and a long list of things he intends to do because of them kindling his fury. So perhaps Exodus 35:3 is telling us, don't labor, rest. Why in the world would you want to kindle Yahweh's wrath over something this simple? Don't do it. Don't kindle his wrath over something that's this easy. Don't work. Rest. Now that makes more sense to me than to think that out of all the tens of thousands of different kinds of labor that a man can do, he just singled out starting a fire. It makes more sense to me that when he is saying, I command you to rest, and I mean it, that he is saying, why would you make me mad over this? Come on. Why? You know, I tell you, thou shalt not kill. I can understand there might be occasions where that one's difficult for you. But in this one, all I'm telling you is rest. Why would you want to make me angry about that? So let me add this to our consideration. Certainly it cannot be forbidding us from keeping our family warm in the winter. If it's acceptable to feed and water our animals on the Sabbath, and it is, and if it's acceptable to get our donkey out of a ditch on the Sabbath, and it is, then surely we're not forbidden to do whatever we have to do to provide warmth for our family in the dead of winter on the Sabbath day. It can't be about starting a fire. And furthermore, I'm going to venture out here and I'll close. I don't believe that food prep is forbidden. Those who believe Exodus 35:3 forbids cooking also tie that passage to Exodus 16, so turn there and we'll bring this thing to a close. Exodus 16, verse 15. This is when the manna came down. And here's what we read in verse 15. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna. Come on, there may be somebody that doesn't know, so if you know, tell me, what does the word manna mean? They looked at it, they didn't say, wow, that's manna. They looked at it and they said, what is that? That's the Hebrew word they used. What is that? And it became known as the what is that from then on. For they knew not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which Yahweh has given you to eat. This is the thing which Yahweh has commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in his tents. And the children of Israel did so and gathered, some more, some less. And when they did measure it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moses said, let no man leave of it till morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was wroth or angry with them. And they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. And it came to pass that on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, this is that which Yahweh has said. Pay attention. Are you looking at it? Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto Yahweh. Bake that which you will bake today, and seethe that you will seethe, and that which remains over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. Does verse 23 say, bake all of it that you gathered today? Bake all of it on Friday. Seethe all of it on Friday. Either bake it or seethe it on Friday. It's not what it says, is it? Read it carefully. Bake that which you will bake today. Which means that it's easy to read this verse and consider there's going to be some baking done the next day too. Bake what you will bake today. Means don't bake what you need to eat tomorrow. Bake what you want to bake today. And there will be some for you to bake tomorrow. Last time you tried to keep it, it bred worms. This time I'm promising you, it will not breed worms. So it does not say bake it all. That's not there. Bake it all. Not in the text. Bake what you will bake today. And the implication is that you'll have some more to bake tomorrow. Verse 24, they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink. You understand that they wouldn't have been amazed by this if they had baked it? If they'd have baked it all on Friday, they'd say, oh, that's how we keep it from stinking. We just cook it all on one day, and the next day it's still good. Come on. I'm trying to help us. They're amazed because it's in the same condition it was in before, unbaked, but the next day it didn't breed worms. That's important. They laid it up till morning, and as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. And Moses said, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto Yahweh. Today you shall not find any in the field. So, I do not believe that Exodus 35:3, nor that Exodus 16 prescribes that we're forbidden from doing any cooking on the Sabbath. We have to be careful because we are forbidden from doing any labor. But fixing a simple meal for our family on the Sabbath is not the same as preparing a banquet. Preparing a banquet is labor. Fixing a meal for my family is not. If you have to throw some mac and cheese in a pot of water and cook it on the Sabbath day, you're not breaking the Sabbath. Now, there are some that protest and they'll ask, then why is Friday called the preparation day? And the answer is simple. It's not. Amen. Nowhere in Torah is the sixth day called the preparation day. Exodus 16 does not call it a preparation day, nor hint that it should be. Exodus 35 does not call it a preparation day, nor hint that it should be. Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, neither of them say the Sabbath is holy. You need to treat the sixth day as a preparation day to get ready for the Sabbath day. This is a contrivance of man. It does not come from the Scriptures. The only day ever referred to as the preparation is in Abib 14. It's concerning Abib 14. Abib 14 is what? Passover. Abib 15 is what? Feast of Unleavened Bread. Abib 15 is called in the Gospels a mega Sabbath, because it's designated as being so in Exodus chapter 12, verse 42. Exodus 12:42 tells us that it is to be much observed. So when you get to the Gospels, they call that day, Abib 15, the first day of unleavened bread, they call it a mega Sabbath. So there are only 6 places in our Bible that the word preparation is used. All 6 of them are used when they were talking about taking Yeshua down from the stake and placing him in the tomb. All 6 places. And if you look at all 6 places, not once will you find the Greek word hemera. The Greek word hemera means day. So it's never called preparation day, it's called the preparation. And John rightly defines what it is. The others just call it the preparation. Matthew, Mark, and Luke call it the preparation. But twice when John refers to it, he refers to it as the preparation of the Passover. The preparation of the Passover. Here's the point. The Greek word was not there, so they added the word day. The Passover is eaten that evening, correct? The Passover is eaten that evening, and unleavened bread begins at nightfall. There is a lot of preparation that has to go for that. We do it every year. Every year there is a lot of preparation, and we can't even observe it fully. But there's still a lot of preparation that goes into keeping Passover and stepping over into unleavened bread. And that's the reason it's called the preparation. Never is that word ever used to refer to a regular Sabbath day, ever. It's only in preparation for Passover and that mega Sabbath day. So here is my point. Don't make every Friday Frantic Friday. Frantic Friday, I got to get ready for the Sabbath. Friday is a day that I'm supposed to labor. So, here is how I get ready for the Sabbath. I work on Friday, and before the sun sets, I stop. I just stop. I labor on Friday, and then at sunset, I go, and I welcome the Sabbath into my life. Well, in conclusion, how many times have I said that this morning? Do not kindle a fire on the Sabbath day in all your dwellings. It makes no sense to me that it would be telling us to not start a fire as a singular piece of type of labor. It makes more sense to me that it's telling us to not be stupid and anger Yahweh over Him simply telling us to rest. I do not see it as a prohibition against cooking. And with that, I see no biblical support whatsoever that we have to treat Fridays as some kind of preparation day for the Sabbath. Now, that does not mean that we cannot make plans to help us protect our day of rest. It doesn't mean we can't do that. All I'm saying is don't make a doctrine out of it. Don't make a doctrine out of what we got to do on Friday. No, think ahead and plan if you want to. That's good. But the command for the Sabbath is simple. Remember the Sabbath day. It's a holy day. It's on the seventh day. Stop working and rest. Say this with me. The Sabbath is a delight. It's a luxury. I'm going to take advantage of it. It's loaded down with benefits. And they're for me. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He Himself bless you. Hallelujah.